When a person truly stops caring about other people's opinions, it is not because they have become cold or arrogant. It is because they have finally answered a much deeper question. Who am I when no one is watching? Most people never reach this point. They build their identity from applause, approval, and social signals, adjusting themselves endlessly to fit expectations. But psychologically, this creates a fragile self, one that collapses the moment validation disappears. Carl Jung would call this a life lived in the persona, a mask shaped for society rather than an expression of the authentic self. Those who no longer seek approval have moved inward. Their sense of worth does not rise or fall with praise or criticism because it is anchored in self-knowledge. They have examined their values, confronted their contradictions, and accepted their imperfections. This process is uncomfortable, often lonely, but it produces something rare: inner coherence. When identity is internally defined, external judgment loses its power. Opinions become information, not commands. This is not indifference, it is maturity. It is the moment a person realizes that being misunderstood is far less dangerous than being untrue to oneself. And once you stop asking who approves of you, you finally begin asking the only question that matters. Are you living in alignment with who you truly are? Emotional independence is what separates those who merely survive socially from those who live psychologically free. Most people are unconsciously trained to hand their emotional state to others. A compliment lifts them, a criticism wounds them. Silence creates anxiety. This is not sensitivity, it is dependence. Jung understood that when emotions are controlled from the outside, the individual never truly matures. They remain reactive, shaped by forces they do not govern. People who no longer care about others' opinions have reclaimed this inner authority. Praise does not intoxicate them, and rejection does not define them because their emotional center is internal. They still feel deeply, but they are not ruled by feeling. They can observe their emotional responses rather than become possessed by them. This ability creates psychological distance, and in that distance, clarity emerges. Such individuals are often misunderstood. They may appear calm in moments when others panic, unmoved where others seek reassurance. But this calm is not emotional numbness, it is self-regulation. When you stop allowing external voices to dictate your inner state, you begin to act intentionally rather than impulsively. Decisions become conscious instead of defensive. The moment you stop letting others decide how you feel is the moment you reclaim your power. And power, once reclaimed, demands responsibility for the life you choose to live. One of the most liberating psychological realizations is understanding that the majority of opinions directed at you are not actually about you. Jung spoke extensively about projection, the unconscious tendency to place our unresolved fears, desires, and conflicts onto others. When someone judges you harshly, dismisses your choices, or tries to define your character, they are often revealing far more about their inner world than yours. Yet, most people internalize these judgments as truth, carrying emotional burdens that were never theirs to begin with. Those who stop caring about others' opinions have learned to recognize this mechanism. They listen, but they do not absorb blindly. They ask themselves, is this feedback grounded in reality, or is it a reflection of someone else's insecurity? This discernment creates psychological immunity. Criticism becomes data, not identity. Praise becomes appreciation, not dependency. This awareness does not make a person defensive or dismissive. Instead, it allows them to respond with calm curiosity rather than emotional reaction. They no longer feel compelled to explain themselves to every voice, because they understand that not every voice is conscious. When you stop mistaking projection for truth, you reclaim clarity. And clarity brings freedom. The freedom to live without carrying the unresolved shadows of people who never took the courage to face their own. At a certain point in psychological development, fear of judgment is no longer the dominant force. It is replaced by purpose. When a person does not know why they are here, they become hypersensitive to how they are seen. Approval becomes a substitute for meaning. Jung observed that a life without meaning inevitably becomes a life ruled by anxiety. Because the mind seeks direction the way a compass seeks north. People who no longer care about others' opinions have discovered something more compelling than acceptance, a sense of inner necessity. Their actions are guided by what must be done, not by how it will be received. Purpose organizes the psyche. It gives structure to thought, emotion, and behavior. When meaning is clear, external judgment loses its emotional charge. Criticism becomes noise, praise becomes secondary. This does not mean they ignore consequences or reject society. It means they are no longer governed by the fear of disapproval. They understand that growth often looks like deviation before it looks like success. Every meaningful path appears strange to those who have chosen comfort over direction. When purpose takes the place of fear, courage becomes sustainable. And once you are anchored to what matters, no opinion, positive or negative, can pull you off course unless you allow it to. There is a reason many people who stop caring about others' opinions have passed through periods of solitude. Not isolation forced by rejection, but solitude chosen or endured as a psychological necessity. Jung believed that without time alone, the individual cannot hear their own unconscious. Noise from the external world drowns out the quieter voice within, the one that carries intuition, truth, and direction. Solitude strips away distraction and reveals what remains when no one is affirming or correcting you. In these quiet spaces, self-trust is built. A person learns to sit with uncertainty, to confront uncomfortable thoughts, and to survive without constant reassurance. This process strengthens the mind. It teaches discernment, what belongs to you and what does not. Opinions lose their urgency when you have learned to think independently. You no longer fear being alone because you have already met yourself there. This is why such individuals often appear inwardly stable. Their confidence was not rehearsed in public, it was forged in silence. They are not dependent on agreement because they are familiar with disagreement, both from others and within themselves. Solitude, when faced honestly, turns fear into clarity. And clarity is what allows a person to stand firm in the world without needing the world to stand behind them. When all of these elements come together, self-defined identity, emotional independence, clarity about projection, purpose, and solitude, the natural outcome is freedom. But this freedom is often misunderstood. It is not rebellion, indifference, or superiority. It is psychological liberation. Jung believed that the greatest burden a person carries is the unlived life within them, and that burden is created largely by obedience to expectations that were never truly our own. People who do not care about others' opinions have stepped out of this inner conflict. They are no longer divided between who they are and who they are expected to be. This inner alignment releases enormous energy. Comparison fades, people-pleasing dissolves, and the constant need to explain oneself disappears. Life becomes simpler, not because it is easier, but because it is honest. With this freedom comes responsibility. When you are no longer hiding behind approval or blame, you must own your choices fully. There is no crowd to disappear into, no validation to lean on. But this is the price of becoming an individual rather than a reflection. True freedom is not the absence of judgment. It is the refusal to let judgment decide your life. And once you understand this, you are no longer waiting to be permitted to live. You begin.